I was 63 years old when I learned that the greatest love of my life had never truly left me. He had simply been taken away. The truth arrived in the quietest way possible. Not with shouting, not with a confession, but with a trembling pause on the other end of a phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because the laundry was still warm in the basket beside me and the scent of lavender detergent lingered in the air. Sunlight stretched thin across my living room floor, catching the dust I had meant to wipe away that morning. My sister Marin's voice sounded smaller than usual. "Bellamy," she said, and then she stopped. She never stopped. Marin was the kind of woman who filled silence before it could settle. But that day she let it hang there between us. "I ran into Conrad's daughter," she said finally. Conrad. I hadn't heard his name spoken out loud in more than 30 years. The sound of it made something tighten in my chest, not sharp, not painful, just old. Like pressing on a bruise you forgot you had. "Oh," I said carefully, "she told me he never stopped loving you." The room felt suddenly too quiet, even the ticking clock above the stove seemed to hesitate. "That's kind of her to say," I replied. My voice sounded distant, as though it belonged to someone braver than me, but Marin didn't laugh. "She said he wrote to you for years." I don't remember standing up. I only remember that the laundry basket tipped and a towel slid onto the floor. "I never received anything," I said. Another pause, and then she said the words that split my life neatly into before and after. "I may not have given you all his letters." Before that moment my life had been steady, not grand, not tragic, just steady. I had been married once, briefly. A good man, Harold, practical, dependable. We shared a quiet house and 2 sensible cars. But we never shared that electricity, the kind that makes you forget to eat dinner because you're still talking at midnight. We divorced when I was 48. No scandal, no shouting, just a soft understanding that we had chosen comfort over passion and comfort had grown stale. We remained cordial. We sent holiday cards, that was the shape of it. After the divorce, I poured myself into work at the library. I liked the smell of old pages, the hush of the stacks, the gentle routine of shelving and sorting. People assumed I preferred solitude. The truth was more complicated. Solitude felt safer. Marin, on the other hand, had always lived loudly. She married young, twice. She moved houses like some women changed hairstyles. She had a laugh that turned heads in restaurants. I admired her boldness when we were girls, but admiration can shift quietly into something else. Conrad had entered my life when I was 26. He came into the bookstore where I worked part-time after college. He asked for a copy of East of Eden and then stayed for an hour talking about Steinbeck like it was scripture. He had hands that moved when he spoke, not wildly, just enough to underline his thoughts. His smile was crooked, intentional. He started coming in every Thursday. I began pretending not to expect him. We spent 2 years building something slow and deliberate. Sunday drives, cheap diners, long walks where our shoulders brushed then lingered. He asked me to marry him on a park bench that smelled faintly of fresh paint. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Those months remain the brightest in my memory, not dramatic, just certain. And then suddenly he changed, or at least I thought he had. He became distant, distracted. He canceled dinners. He stopped answering calls. One evening I went to his apartment unannounced. The hallway smelled like someone had burned toast. His door opened halfway. "Bellamy," he said, surprised, not pleased, not angry, just surprised. "We need to talk," he added. I remember the way the light flickered in his kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator. "I can't marry you," he said, just like that. No tears, no explanation that made sense. "It's better this way," he told me. "You deserve someone steadier." I asked if there was someone else. He hesitated. "Yes," he said finally, "that was the knife. I left with what dignity I could gather. I did not beg. I did not scream. I told myself that love, if it needed convincing, was already gone. 2 months later, I heard he had moved to another state. And that was that, or so I believed. Now, at 63, sitting on my sofa with a fallen towel at my feet, I held the phone to my ear while my sister's confession settled into my bones. "What do you mean you didn't give me his letters?" I asked. Marin exhaled slowly. "He came by the house after you stopped speaking to him." "I didn't stop speaking to him," I whispered. "He ended it." "He said you ended it," she replied. The words felt wrong, misaligned. "He brought letters," she continued. "He said he had written you, that you never answered." My heart thudded hard enough that I pressed my palm against my chest. I told him, she said carefully, that you were moving on, that you didn't want to reopen anything. You told him that. My voice cracked, not loud, just thin. I thought I was protecting you, she said. Protecting me from what? From love, from heartbreak that had already happened? How many letters? I asked. A handful at first, she admitted, then more. He would leave them with me when he couldn't reach you. And you decided, I said slowly, that I shouldn't read them. She didn't answer immediately. I was young, she said at last. I thought he would only hurt you again. The lavender scent in the room had turned bitter in my throat. You never told me, I said. I didn't think it mattered after he moved. It mattered. Every lonely birthday, every quiet Christmas, every time I wondered what I had done wrong, I swallowed carefully. Why tell me now? There was a tremor in her breathing. Because he died last month, she said. The words landed gently, and yet they broke something inside me all the same. And I don't want to carry this anymore. I stared at the sunlight on the floor. All these years I had believed I was the woman who had been left. What if I had been the woman who was kept in the dark? Do you still have them? I asked. There was a long pause. Yes. I did not sleep that night. The clock on my bedside table glowed 2:14 a.m., then 3:03, then 4:27. Each hour felt like it was tapping me on the shoulder, reminding me that something inside my life had shifted. Conrad had written to me for years. And my sister, my own sister, had decided I should never know. At dawn, I rose quietly, though there was no one in the house to disturb. The floor felt cool under my feet. I made coffee the way I always did, 2 scoops, not quite level. The sound of it dripping into the glass pot was steady, almost comforting. Routine has a way of pretending everything is still normal, but nothing felt normal. I kept hearing Marin's voice. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From hope, from reconciliation. From the possibility that the story I had believed for 3 decades was wrong. I poured the coffee and did not add sugar. I didn't taste it anyway. By 9 o'clock, I had dressed in a soft blue cardigan and sensible shoes, as if I were going somewhere important. Perhaps I was. Marin lived only 20 minutes away in the same town where we had grown up. The drive felt longer. The trees along Maple Street were bare this time of year. Their branches looked like open hands reaching toward a pale sky. I tried to steady my breathing. I was not going there to scream. I was not going there to accuse. I was going there to see the letters, that was all. Marin's house was smaller than mine, but newer. She answered the door after the second knock. She looked older than she had 2 days ago, or perhaps I had never looked closely enough. Her hair, once the color of dark honey, was streaked fully gray now. Her lipstick was slightly uneven. Bellamy, she said softly. I nodded. We stood there for a moment, sisters who had shared a bedroom, secrets, hand-me-down dresses, and apparently silence. Come in, she said. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something baked, maybe banana bread. Marin had always baked when she was anxious. We sat at her kitchen table. The same oak table she had bought after her second divorce. I remembered helping her assemble it. She folded her hands. I didn't expect you to come this quickly, she admitted. When did you expect me? I asked gently. She looked down. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I took a breath. I don't know what I want yet. That seemed honest enough. She stood slowly and walked toward the hallway closet. I heard the scrape of something being dragged, a box. She placed it carefully on the table between us. It was not large, just a simple cardboard box, the kind you might store winter scarves in. My heart beat louder than it had any right to. These are all of them, she said. I did not reach for it immediately. How many? I asked. 23, she replied. 23 letters, 23 pieces of a life I never lived. I lifted the lid. The letters were bundled in twine, the envelopes were yellowed at the edges. Some had my name written across them in Conrad's familiar slanted handwriting, Bellamy Collins. My maiden name, I traced one lightly with my fingertip. The ink had faded, but I knew that handwriting anywhere. He came by the house, Marin began quietly. The first time he said he was confused that you had stopped responding. I told him you were upset. I was devastated, I corrected gently. I thought he had chosen someone else. He said you told him you couldn't marry someone who wasn't sure. The room tilted slightly. I never said that, I whispered. She swallowed. He showed me the last letter he claimed to have sent you. He said you never answered. I never received it. The silence between us thickened. I thought, she continued slowly, that he was playing with you. That he was trying to keep you on hold while he figured out his own life. Why didn't you ask me? I asked. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw something other than guilt. I saw fear. Because, she said, you were glowing when you were with him. I had never seen you like that, and when it fell apart you barely ate. You stopped laughing. You walked around like someone had taken your bones out. Her voice wavered. I was afraid if he came back you'd lose yourself completely. I studied her face carefully. And so you decided to lose him for me? She flinched at that. I thought I was saving you from a man who didn't know his own heart. And now? She looked at the box. Now I think I was saving myself. The honesty of it landed heavier than any denial could have. Saving yourself from what? I asked quietly. She let out a long breath. From being second. I didn't understand at first, she continued. Growing up, you were always the steady one, the good one. Teachers loved you, boys respected you. You didn't chase anything, things just came to you. I had to fight for attention, I had to be louder. I had never seen it that way. When Conrad came around, she said, he barely noticed me and I hated that I cared. The kitchen felt smaller. You were engaged, I reminded her. Yes, she said, to a man who barely looked at me when I entered a room. The truth is rarely dramatic. It is usually small, petty, human. Did you love him? I asked. She hesitated. I loved the idea of being loved. That was answer enough. And when Conrad started coming by, she continued, I saw how he looked when he spoke about you, like you were inevitable. My throat tightened. I told myself I was protecting you, she said. But part of me, a small, ugly part, didn't want you to have something that certain. I closed my eyes briefly. Jealousy, not grand betrayal, not an affair, not some elaborate scheme, just jealousy. Raw and ordinary. How many letters did he write before he stopped? I asked. All of them are there, she said. The last one, it was different. Different how? He sounded tired. My fingers tightened around the twine. Did he ever come back after that? She shook her head. He said he was moving, that if you didn't want him, he would stop forcing his way into your life. My heart thudded painfully. I untied the bundle slowly. The first letter was dated 3 weeks after our supposed breakup. I did not read it yet, I simply held it. 35 years of silence pressed into that paper. Why tell me now? I asked again, softer this time. Marin's shoulders sagged. Because when I went to his funeral, she said quietly, his daughter asked if I was the sister. She said he kept your photograph in his desk until the day he died. My breath left me slowly. He never married? I asked. He did, she said. Briefly, it didn't last. I nodded. Something inside me was shifting, not exploding, not collapsing, but rearranging. All these years I had told myself a story. He chose someone else. He wasn't brave enough. I wasn't enough. But what if the truth was simpler and sadder? Two people in love, misled, separated by pride and interference. I stood from the table, letters in hand. I'm taking these, I said. She nodded quickly. Of course. At the door I paused. I don't know what this means yet, I told her honestly. I know, she replied, and I don't know how long it will take for me to understand how to feel about you. She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. I'll wait, she said. I believed her. On the drive home, I did not turn on the radio. The box rested on the passenger seat beside me as though it were a living thing. I did not open the letters that day. I placed them on my dining table. I made tea. I sat. I stared at my younger self in the framed photograph near the bookshelf, the one taken the summer Conrad proposed. I looked hopeful, certain. And I wondered what that woman would think of me now. Would she forgive me for giving up so easily? Or would she forgive him for never fighting harder? I reached for the first envelope. My hands trembled, not violently, just enough to remind me that some wounds do not disappear. They wait. And I was finally ready to read what had been waiting for me all along. I opened the first letter at exactly 7:12 that evening. I know the time because I looked at the clock before I broke the seal, as if I were marking the beginning of something sacred. The paper felt fragile between my fingers. It had softened with age, the creases delicate. Conrad's handwriting moved across the page in that same steady slant I remembered, confident, slightly impatient, as though his thoughts ran ahead of his pen. Bellamy, I don't understand what happened. I had to stop there. For 35 years I had believed he understood everything. That he had calmly chosen another woman and walked away from me with certainty. But this letter began with confusion. I swallowed and kept reading. You said you couldn't marry someone who hesitated. I don't remember hesitating. I remember being scared, yes, but only because loving you felt enormous. I thought fear meant I needed to be better, not that I needed to leave. My hands trembled slightly. I had never said that to him. I had never told him I couldn't marry someone who hesitated. That was the sentence Marin had claimed he repeated to her. I read on, "If I made you feel unsure, I am sorry, but I never chose anyone else. There is no one else. There has only ever been you." The room felt smaller. The radiator hummed softly behind me. Outside, a car passed, its tires whispering over pavement. The world continued as if my life were not quietly being rewritten. I finished the first letter in one breath. He wrote about our Sunday drives, about the way I held my coffee cup with both hands when it was too hot, about the small scar on my wrist from childhood, something only someone who had traced it with his fingers would remember. And at the end, "Please write back. If you don't want me, say it clearly. I can survive the truth. I can't survive silence." Silence. I placed the letter down gently as if it might shatter. Silence had not come from me. I had been waiting for his call, his apology, his explanation. We had both been waiting, and in that waiting, something fragile had broken. I reached for the second letter. It was dated 3 weeks later. "Bellamy, I'm trying to respect what I think is your decision, but I can't pretend I understand it." His tone was still hopeful but thinner. He described stopping by the bookstore and being told I had reduced my hours. He wrote that he had called my apartment, but the phone rang without answer. My stomach tightened. I had changed my shifts because I couldn't bear standing behind that counter hoping he would walk in. I had avoided the phone because every ring made my heart jump painfully. We had both mistaken grief for rejection. By the fifth letter, his handwriting looked heavier. "If I hurt you in a way I don't see, tell me. Don't let pride steal something this real." Pride, that word lingered. Had it been pride that kept me from showing up at his door again, or was it self-respect? There is a thin line between the two, and at 28, I don't think I knew the difference. The seventh letter mentioned Marin. "I left another note with your sister. She said you were trying to move on. If that's true, I'll try to honor it. But it doesn't feel like you. It feels like someone speaking for you." I closed my eyes. He had sensed it. He had felt that something was off, and still he stepped back. The letters became shorter over time, less explanation, more restraint. By the 15th letter, his words felt measured. "I won't keep chasing if you don't want me to. I loved you honestly. I still do, but I won't force my way into a life that has closed its door." I pressed the paper to my chest. The final letter sat at the bottom of the stack. The envelope was thinner, the handwriting slightly unsteady. It was dated almost 2 years after the first. 2 years, he had written for 2 years, Bellamy. "This will be the last letter I leave. I'm moving to Ohio next month. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I need to learn how to live without waiting for you." I felt tears slide down my cheeks, slow and warm. "If I misunderstood you, I'm sorry. If you misunderstood me, I forgive you. I hope one day you find someone who makes you feel certain. You deserve certainty. I always thought that someone might be me, and at the very bottom. I will always wonder what might have happened if we had spoken face to face instead of through hurt." I set the letter down. The house was completely still. I had spent decades believing I was abandoned. He had spent years believing I had chosen to walk away. And between us stood one woman who thought she was helping. I rose slowly and walked to the kitchen sink. I splashed cool water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror above it. 63, lines around my eyes, silver in my hair. But behind those eyes, I could see her, the 28-year-old woman who had waited by the window for a man who never came. "He did come," I whispered to my reflection, "just not to me." I dried my face and returned to the table. Anger began to rise, not explosive, not wild, but deep. A slow heat in my chest, not just at Marin, at myself. Why hadn't I gone back one more time? Why had I accepted his single sentence in that flickering kitchen as final? But then I remembered that night clearly. His eyes had been tired. He had said, "There's someone else." That was not confusion, that was deliberate, unless someone had spoken to him before I arrived. A thought formed slowly. What if Marin had told him something too? I picked up my phone. It was nearly 10 p.m., but I did not care. She answered on the third ring. "Bellamy, did you ever speak to Conrad alone before he ended things?" I asked. Silence, too long. "Yes," she said finally. My heart dropped. "When?" "A few days before," she admitted. "What did you tell him?" Her breathing grew shallow. "I told him you were worried he wasn't ready, that you thought he might leave eventually. I thought I was pushing him to reassure you." "But you didn't tell me," I said. "No, and did you tell him you thought I deserved someone steadier?" Another pause. "Yes." The pieces slid into place. He had confronted me that night with the fear that I doubted him. I had confronted him with the fear that he wanted someone else. Neither of us understood where the doubt had begun. It had been planted. I never asked you to speak for me, I said quietly. I know. Why didn't you just let us figure it out ourselves? Her voice cracked. Because I didn't believe love like that lasted. And I didn't want to watch you fall harder. I closed my eyes. You didn't trust him, I said. No, she admitted. And you didn't trust me? Silence answered. I sat down slowly. He died believing I rejected him, I said. Yes. And I lived believing he replaced me. Yes, there it was, 35 years of misplaced grief. Do you regret it? I asked. Her voice was barely audible. Every day. I ended the call gently. I did not yell. I did not cry loudly. I simply sat in the quiet house, surrounded by the ghost of a life that might have been. But beneath the sorrow, something unexpected began to stir. Clarity. For the first time in decades, I understood what had truly happened. There had been no betrayal between Conrad and me. Only interference, fear, pride, and now at 63 I had a choice. I could bury this truth and let it become another silent ache, or I could confront it fully, not just with Marin but with the past itself. The letters lay before me like an invitation. Not to reclaim what was lost, but to reclaim myself. I picked up the final letter again and read the last line one more time. I will always wonder what might have happened if we had spoken face to face instead of through hurt. He had wondered. So had I. And perhaps even now there was still something left to face. The next morning I woke with swollen eyes and a steadier heart. Grief had shifted overnight. It was no longer just sadness. It had edges now, questions, resolve. I made oatmeal. I sliced a banana into it. I stood at the kitchen counter and forced myself to eat, even though every bite felt like cardboard. There is something grounding about feeding your body when your emotions feel untethered. By 9:30, I had Conrad's final letter folded neatly inside my purse. I did not know exactly where I was going, only that sitting still with the past was no longer enough. Marin had said she attended his funeral. That meant she knew where he had lived, where he had been buried. I dialed her number again. She answered quickly this time. Bellamy, where is he buried? I asked. She exhaled softly as if she had expected this. Riverside Memorial, about 40 minutes from here. I'm going. There was silence on the line. Do you want me to come? She asked carefully. No. The word formed instantly in my chest, but I did not say it harshly. Not today, I replied. The drive felt different from the one to her house. That day I had carried anger and disbelief. Today I carried something heavier, finality. The highway stretched ahead in long gray ribbons. I watched the fields pass by, winter brown and quiet. My hands rested firmly on the steering wheel. I did not turn on the radio. I wanted to hear my thoughts clearly. I tried to imagine what Conrad's life had looked like after me. A different state, a different woman. Perhaps a different version of himself. Had he laughed easily? Had he ever told her about me? The thought tightened something in my throat. Riverside Memorial appeared gradually, iron gates, stone pillars, rows of trees lining the entrance like quiet witnesses. I parked near the office first. A young woman sat behind the desk. She looked no older than 25. Can I help you? She asked gently. Yes, I said. I'm looking for a grave, Conrad Harris. She typed quickly. The clicking of her keyboard felt too loud in the small office. Section C, she said. Row 12, I can print you a map. Thank you. The paper trembled slightly in my hand as I walked back outside. The cemetery was quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through dry leaves. The air smelled faintly of damp earth. I followed the map slowly. Section C, row 12. And then I saw it. Conrad Harris. 1959-2025. Beloved father, beloved friend. The word beloved felt like both comfort and accusation. I stood there longer than I expected before I stepped closer. The stone was simple, no grand carving. No elaborate inscription, just his name. I reached out and touched it. The granite was cold beneath my fingertips. I didn't know, I whispered. The wind shifted slightly, brushing my hair across my cheek. For a long moment, I said nothing else. What does one say to a man who loved you faithfully but died believing you chose to leave? I never received your letters, I said finally. Not until now. My voice sounded steady, older, wiser. I thought you had replaced me. I thought I wasn't enough. The truth tasted strange out loud. I was wrong. I removed the final letter from my purse and unfolded it carefully. I brought this, I said softly. You wrote that you forgave me. I wish I had the chance to say the same to you face to face. My throat tightened. You weren't unsure, you were afraid, and I mistook that for betrayal. Tears blurred the inscription. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder, I whispered. There it was, not dramatic, not loud, but honest. A woman in her 60s standing before a grave, apologizing for a silence that had lasted 3 decades. I crouched down slowly and placed the letter at the base of the headstone. I secured it under a small stone so the wind would not carry it away. I don't know if this gives either of us peace, I said quietly, but I needed to say it. I stayed there for nearly an hour, not speaking much, just remembering the bookstore, the park bench proposal. The way he used to tap his fingers lightly on the steering wheel when he was thinking. Small things, the kind that do not fade. Eventually, I rose and brushed the dirt from my knees. Before leaving, I made one quiet promise. I won't let this end in silence again. On the drive home, I realized something else. My grief had always been tangled with shame. I had believed I wasn't chosen. That belief had shaped the rest of my life more than I ever admitted. I married Harold because he was steady, because he did not ignite fear or uncertainty. I avoided risk. I avoided vulnerability. I told myself I preferred calm, but perhaps I had simply been protecting the wound Conrad left behind, except now I knew he had not left. He had tried to stay, and someone else had intervened. When I arrived home, I did not remove my coat immediately. I stood in the entryway and looked at the familiar walls of my house. I had built this life carefully, quietly, independently. But it had been built around a misunderstanding. That realization did not erase the years. It did not magically restore youth, but it shifted something fundamental inside me. I walked to the dining table where the rest of the letters still lay. I gathered them gently and returned them to the box. Then I picked up my phone. Marin answered after 2 rings. I want to see him, I said, her breath caught. How was it? Peaceful. A pause. I left his last letter there. She was silent for several seconds. Bellamy, she said carefully, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not sure what you deserve yet, I replied honestly. Another pause. But I know this, I continued. You took something from me, not just him, you took my choice. Her voice trembled. I know, you decided what I could handle, you decided what I should feel, that wasn't yours to decide. I was wrong, she whispered. Yes, I said gently, you were. The words were not cruel, they were simply true. And I need you to understand something else, I continued. I will not carry your guilt for you. She inhaled sharply. I've carried enough already. Silence settled between us again, but this silence felt different, clearer. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said finally. But things won't go back to how they were. I don't expect them to, she replied. And for the first time in this entire unraveling, I believed her completely. After we hung up, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, not revenge, not triumph, relief. The truth had been spoken aloud. The blame no longer rested on ghosts or misunderstandings. It had a name, it had a face, and I had confronted it calmly. That evening, I sat by my living room window as the sun dipped below the rooftops. For years, I had wondered what might have been. Now I knew what might have been was real. It had simply been interrupted. And though I could not rewrite the past, I could decide what to do with its truth. For the first time since I was 28, I felt something stir inside me that I had long buried. Not grief, not regret, but strength. And I wasn't finished yet. The days after I visited Conrad's grave did not feel dramatic. There were no sudden revelations, no cinematic breakthroughs. There was simply a quiet rearranging inside me. I moved through my routines, the library, the grocery store, the evening news, but something fundamental had shifted. It was as if I had been walking slightly hunched for 35 years without realizing it, and now, slowly, my spine was straightening. I began noticing small things. The way I apologized too quickly, the way I avoided disagreement, the way I dismissed my own desires before anyone else had the chance to, all habits born from that single belief I wasn't chosen, but I had been chosen, he had written 23 times. The truth did not bring Conrad back, it did not restore lost years, but it restored something else, my sense of worth. 3 days after the cemetery, Marin called again. Can we talk? She asked. Her voice was subdued, not dramatic, just careful. Yes, I said. She suggested we meet at the small cafe near Main Street, the one with chipped blue mugs and the smell of cinnamon that never quite fades. We used to go there in our 20s, back when the worst thing between us had been borrowed sweaters. When I walked in, she was already seated in the corner booth. She looked smaller somehow, less composed. She stood when she saw me. "Hi," she said. "Hi, we ordered tea." Neither of us touched it at first. For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things, the weather, her neighbor's new dog, the library's budget cuts. It felt almost absurd. Finally, she folded her hands. "I've been thinking," she said. "So have I." She gave a faint, nervous smile. "I told myself for years that if he had really wanted you, he would have found another way." I studied her carefully. "That was easier than admitting I interfered," she continued. "Yes," I said quietly. "It probably was." She nodded. I didn't realize how much I reshaped the story in my own head. "That's what we do," I said, "when the truth makes us uncomfortable." She swallowed. "Do you hate me?" The question was soft, honest. I took my time before answering. "No," I said finally. Her shoulders dropped slightly. "But I don't trust you the way I used to." That hurt her. I saw it immediately, and yet I did not soften it. "You made a choice for me without asking. That changes things." "I know," she said, "and I can't undo it." "No," I agreed, "you can't." There was no cruelty in my tone, only clarity. She looked down at her untouched tea. "I think," she said slowly, "I've been jealous of you my whole life." The admission did not shock me anymore. "I didn't see it," I said. "I didn't want you to," she replied. She began tracing the rim of her mug with her fingertip. "When Conrad came to me with those letters, part of me felt powerful, like I held something important, something you wanted." Her honesty was uncomfortable. "I told myself I was protecting you," she continued. "But if I'm completely truthful, I liked being the gatekeeper. I let that settle." "Why tell me that?" I asked. "Because I don't want to hide behind excuses anymore." The cafe was quiet around us. A couple near the window whispered over pastries. A barista wiped down the counter. Life moved on. "You hurt me," I said gently. "I know. And you hurt him." She closed her eyes briefly. "I know." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said something I hadn't fully planned. "I'm not angry at you anymore." She looked up quickly. "You're not?" "No." "What are you then?" I considered that carefully. "I'm disappointed," I said, "and I'm grieving, but I'm not angry." That seemed to confuse her. "I thought you would scream," she admitted. "I thought so too," I replied softly. "But anger doesn't bring back lost years, it just steals more." She stared at me for a long time. "You've changed," she said. I nodded slightly. Yes, and I had, not because of age. Not because of time, but because the story I told myself about my own life had shifted. "I spent 35 years believing I wasn't enough," I said quietly. "I won't spend the rest of them believing I was wronged." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't," I said gently. "You accept it, you live differently now." She nodded. "I don't want us to drift apart," she whispered. I reached for my tea and finally took a sip. It had gone lukewarm. "We won't drift," I said, "but we won't pretend either." She nodded again, and in that small cafe booth something fragile but real began to rebuild, not the same as before, but honest. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Conrad's daughter called me. I had given her my number at the cemetery office, unsure if she would ever use it. Her voice on the phone was cautious but kind. "Bellamy?" she asked. "Yes. This is Alora, my father's daughter." The word daughter felt strange in my ears. "Yes, Alora." "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she began, "but my father spoke about you often. He kept your photograph in his desk. I found letters addressed to you in a box of his things. They were never sent." My breath caught. "Unsent?" I asked. "Yes." "From the last year of his life." My knees weakened slightly. I sat down. "He never stopped wondering," she said softly. I closed my eyes. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said if he ever saw you again, he would ask one question." "What question?" "Did you really stop loving me?" The simplicity of it pierced me. "No," I whispered, "I didn't." Alora's voice softened. "I thought you should know." We spoke for nearly an hour. She told me about his later years, his work, his brief marriage, his quiet nature. "He wasn't bitter," she said, "just reflective." I smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." Before hanging up, she said something that lingered long after the call ended. "He would be glad you know the truth." I sat in my living room long after the line went silent. For decades, I had believed my story ended in rejection. Now I understood it ended in misunderstanding. That distinction matters. One erodes you, the other humbles you. That evening, I did something small but symbolic. I took down the framed photograph of my younger self, the one taken the summer Conrad proposed, and placed it on the center of the mantel. Not hidden on a shelf, not tucked away, displayed. That woman deserved to be seen. She had loved bravely. She had been worthy, and she had not been foolish. As I stood back and looked at the photo, I felt something settle inside me. Closure does not always mean reunion. Sometimes it means understanding. And for the first time in 35 years, I no longer felt like the woman who had been left. I felt like the woman who had been loved, and that changed everything. It is a strange thing to grieve differently at 63 than you did at 28. At 28, grief felt sharp, immediate, personal. At 63, it feels layered, reflective, almost instructional. In the weeks after Alora's phone call, I found myself revisiting pieces of my life I had long accepted without question. My marriage to Harold. The way I agreed to things quickly as if negotiation might cause someone to leave. The way I swallowed disappointment instead of asking for clarity. None of it had been dramatic, but it had been shaped by something. A quiet belief that love was fragile, and that I was lucky to have any version of it. One Saturday morning, I pulled out an old cedar chest from my bedroom closet. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, programs from school plays, a dried corsage from a high school dance. And at the very bottom, tucked in an envelope I hadn't opened in years, was a photograph of Conrad and me at the lake. We were sitting on the hood of his car. My hair was loose. He was laughing at something I had just said. We looked easy. Not strained, not uncertain, certain. I ran my thumb lightly over the image. I wasn't foolish, I whispered, and for the first time I believed it completely. Marin and I began speaking more honestly after that cafe conversation, not constantly, not dramatically, but carefully. One afternoon, she invited me to dinner, just the two of us. She made roasted chicken and green beans. The house smelled warm and familiar. We sat at her oak table again, but this time the box of letters was not between us. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, about not carrying my guilt. Yes, she paused. I've carried it for so long that it became part of how I saw you. I tilted my head slightly. How so? I always assumed you resented me for something. Even before Conrad, I projected my own jealousy onto you. I considered that. There were times, I admitted slowly, when I felt you competing with me, even in small ways. She nodded, not defensive. I was. The honesty no longer shocked me. I don't want to compete anymore, she said. We're 63 and 65, I replied gently. That seems exhausting. She gave a faint laugh. Yes, it does. There was something freeing about speaking plainly, no performance, no rewriting, just truth. Do you ever wish you had told me sooner? She asked. Of course, I said. Would it have changed everything? I thought about that carefully. At 35, maybe at 45, I don't know, but knowing now has changed something just as important. What? My relationship with myself. She studied me. You seem lighter. I am. Because the heaviest weight had never been Conrad's absence. It had been the belief that I wasn't chosen. A few days later, Alora invited me to her father's house. I'm sorting through his things, she explained. There are boxes I don't fully understand. I thought you might. I hesitated only briefly before agreeing. The drive to his town felt less intimidating than the first trip to the cemetery. When I arrived, Alora opened the door with a soft smile. She had his eyes. Thank you for coming, she said. The house smelled faintly of old books and coffee. It wasn't grand, it was lived in. Warm. She led me to his study. There, against the far wall, stood a wooden desk. On it rested a framed photograph of the lake, the same day as mine, but a different angle. In his version, he was looking at me, not at the camera, at me. My breath caught. He kept that there always, Alora said quietly. I stepped closer. 35 years and he had kept this. Did your mother mind? I asked gently. She didn't understand it, Alora replied. But she knew it wasn't about betrayal, it was about something unfinished. Unfinished, that word felt accurate. Alora handed me a small box. These were in his bottom drawer. Inside were copies of some of the letters he had sent me, carbon copies he had kept, and beneath them 3 envelopes addressed but never mailed. Dated 2023, my hands trembled slightly as I opened one. Bellamy, if this ever finds you, know that I never blamed you. I blamed youth. I blamed pride. I blamed fear. I swallowed. If you were happy, I hoped you stayed that way. If you weren't, I hoped you found your way back to yourself, back to myself. The words felt almost prophetic. He never stopped hoping you'd know, Alora said softly. I folded the letter carefully. "Thank you for showing me this," I said. She nodded. "I think he would be relieved." Relieved, that word settled gently in my chest. When I returned home that evening, something felt complete. Not restored, not rewritten, but understood. I placed Conrad's final unsent letter beside the others on my dining table. Then I did something I had not done in decades. I wrote him one back, not to mail. Not to place on a grave, but to close the circle. "Conrad, I never stopped loving you. I stopped believing I was loved in return. That was my mistake." The words flowed more easily than I expected. We were young. We let silence speak for us. But I know now what I didn't then. Love requires courage, and sometimes we both lacked it. I paused. "I forgive you for stepping back. I forgive myself for not stepping forward, and I forgive the space that came between us." When I finished, I felt steady, not broken. Not consumed by what might have been, just steady. I folded the letter and placed it inside the box with the others. Then I closed the lid, not to hide it, but to honor it. That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror again. The same silver hair, the same lines, but my eyes looked different, not younger, clearer. I realized something quietly profound. The love of my life had not been stolen from me, it had been interrupted. And though I could not reclaim the years, I could reclaim the lesson. Never let someone else narrate your story. Never surrender your voice to avoid discomfort. And never assume silence means rejection. As I turned off the bedside lamp, I felt a calm I had not known in decades. The past had finally spoken, and I had finally answered. Healing does not arrive like a parade. It comes quietly, in small decisions, in the way you answer a question, in the way you hold your shoulders when you walk into a room. After visiting Conrad's house and writing that final letter, something inside me settled into place. Not perfectly, not without ache, but with clarity. For the first time in decades, I wasn't trying to outrun a memory. I was standing beside it. 2 weeks later, Marin invited me to Sunday dinner with her children and grandchildren. In the past, I would have hesitated. Family gatherings always carried subtle undercurrents. Old roles, old hierarchies. But this time, I went without rehearsing how I would behave. Her dining room buzzed with noise when I arrived. Her grandson was chasing the dog. Her daughter was arguing gently about oven temperature. Laughter spilled from the kitchen. Marin met me at the door. There was no tension in her face this time, just quiet hope. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wanted to," I replied. That was new. We sat around the long table, plates clinking, forks scraping softly. Conversation flowed easily. At one point, her daughter asked, "Aunt Bellamy, why didn't you ever remarry?" The question wasn't cruel, just curious. In the past, I would have shrugged it off with something polite. This time, I answered honestly. "I loved once in a way that set a certain standard," I said calmly, "and I didn't want to pretend with anything less." The table quieted slightly, not uncomfortably, just attentively. Marin looked at me. There was no shame in her expression, only understanding. Later, while clearing dishes, she touched my arm gently. "That was brave," she said. "No," I replied. "That was honest." A few days after that dinner, something unexpected happened at the library. A man named Thomas began visiting more often. He was 68, a retired history teacher, thoughtful eyes, soft-spoken. He asked thoughtful questions about books, stayed longer than necessary. One afternoon, as I checked out his stack of biographies, he hesitated. "Would you like to have coffee sometime?" He asked gently. There was no pressure in his tone, no assumption, just an invitation. Years ago, I might have deflected. I might have said I was busy, but I no longer felt afraid of being chosen or choosing. "I would," I said. And I surprised myself with how steady my voice sounded. Our first coffee was simple. A corner table, 2 mugs, late afternoon light through dusty windows. He spoke about his late wife with tenderness, not heaviness. "She passed 5 years ago," he said. It took me a long time to understand that loving again wouldn't erase loving her. I nodded slowly. "I know something about unfinished love," I said. He did not press for details. He simply listened. And I realized something quietly profound. I was not comparing him to Conrad. I was not measuring him against a ghost. I was simply present. When he walked me to my car, he said, "I'd like to see you again." "I'd like that too," I replied. It felt uncomplicated, not because my past had disappeared, but because I had finally made peace with it. That night I called Marin. "I went on a coffee date," I told her. There was a pause and then a small, surprised laugh. "You did?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. I'm glad, she said softly. I am too. There was no jealousy in her tone this time, no undercurrent, just sincerity. I won't interfere, she added gently. I smiled. I know, and I did because something in her had shifted too. Guilt, when faced honestly, can become humility. And humility changes people. Weeks passed. Thomas and I walked in the park. We attended a small concert at the community center. We spoke about books, about aging, about regret. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching the sun lower itself behind the trees, he asked quietly, "Do you believe people get second chances at love?" I thought carefully before answering. "I don't think it's about second chances," I said. "I think it's about clearer eyes." He smiled slightly. "I like that. I did too, because I no longer saw love as something fragile and easily lost. I saw it as something that required voice, clarity, courage, things I had learned too late for Conrad, but not too late for myself." One afternoon, I returned to Riverside Memorial alone, not out of grief, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. I stood before Conrad's grave again. "I'm seeing someone," I said softly. The wind moved gently through the trees. I didn't expect that at 63. I smiled faintly. "I don't think it diminishes what we had." I touched the stone lightly. "You taught me what it feels like to be certain, and losing that taught me what silence can cost." I took a slow breath. "Thank you for loving me bravely." Even if we didn't finish the story, there were no tears this time, just peace. As I walked back to my car, I felt something close gently behind me, not like a slammed door, like a book being set carefully back on a shelf, complete. That evening, Thomas called. "I was thinking about you," he said. "What about?" I asked. "The way you listen, it feels intentional." I smiled softly. "I've learned to pay attention." "And what have you learned most?" he asked. I looked out my living room window at the fading light. "That silence is rarely the truth," I said, "and love deserves to be spoken out loud." There was a pause. "That sounds like wisdom earned," he replied. "It is." At 63, I finally confronted the lie that cost me the love of my life. But the confrontation was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice. It was about telling my sister the truth without cruelty. It was about telling myself the truth without shame. And it was about stepping into whatever years remain without carrying a story that was never accurate to begin with. Conrad's love was real. My grief was real. Marin's jealousy was real. But none of those realities get to define the rest of my life. I choose that now.